Have you ever wondered how some companies just seem to get it right again and again, creating products we just can't imagine living without? Well, the secret isn't always about better technology. It's about a better way of thinking. It's called design thinking, and today we're going to break down exactly how it works. If you're ready to learn a new way to solve problems, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps more people find this explainer. All right, let's jump in. So it all really starts with this one massive question. Every single year, you have these brilliant teams, they have huge budgets, and they launch new products that just fall flat. Why? Is the tech bad? Did they not try hard enough? Well, most of the time, it's neither of those. The real reason is usually a complete failure of perspective. And that failure, it creates something we can call the innovation gap. See, on one side, you've got businesses, and they're totally focused on their world, what's technologically possible and what's financially viable. But over on the other side, you've got actual people with all their messy, complicated, and often unspoken needs and feelings. So many great ideas basically die right in the middle of this gap because they never, ever truly connect with the human side of the equation. Okay, so how in the world do we bridge that gap? Well, we have to completely flip our starting point. We need to adopt what's called a human-centered mindset. This right here is the absolute heart of design thinking. It's a fundamental shift from thinking for people to thinking with them. So here's the textbook definition. Design thinking is all about finding that perfect sweet spot where three things overlap. First, and most importantly, it starts with human desirability. What do people really want or need? Then you bring in technological feasibility. What can we actually build? And finally, you have to have business viability. Can this actually work as a sustainable business? True innovation, the really magical stuff, happens right there in the middle. Tim Brown, who's a huge name in this world, puts it perfectly. He says it's all about using a designer's toolkit, empathy, creativity, getting your hands dirty, to connect what people need with what technology can do. It's a big shift from just designing things to designing the process for solving pretty much any problem you can think of. And this really gets at a core difference in how we think. A traditional analytical mindset is usually convergent. It starts with all the rules and constraints and tries to narrow everything down to the one single best answer. But a designer's mindset, it's divergent. It starts with people, with empathy, and it blows up the possibilities, exploring tons of different paths before picking one. It's way less about analyzing what already exists and much more about inventing what comes next. Okay, so that's all the theory. But what does this actually look like in the real world? How does it work in practice? Let's walk through an amazing real-world story to see this full process in action, from the very first spark of empathy all the way to a finished product. All right, let's talk about Shimano. You've probably heard of them. They're a huge Japanese company that makes bike parts, and they had a problem. Their sales of high-end bikes in the US were totally flat. Now, their first thought was what you'd expect. Let's make a better gear, a lighter frame. But instead, they decided to try something completely different. They tried design thinking. So they followed a process that really boils down to these three big ideas. First, you have to see the world through your user's eyes, genuinely. Second, you don't just sit in a room and think your way to an answer, you get out there and build your way to it. And third, once you have an idea, you have to tell a story that makes people believe in it. So the team just went out and watched people. And what they discovered was kind of shocking. A whopping 90% of American adults don't ride bikes. And why? It had nothing to do with the number of gears. People felt intimidated by the super serious cycling culture. They hated the complicated bike shops, and they were worried about flat tires and maintenance. And that led to the big aha moment. The problem wasn't the bike. It was the entire experience of cycling. With that huge insight, they moved into prototyping. But instead of working on another complex racing bike, they asked a totally different question. What if a bike was just simple, comfortable, fun? They started building rough, quick prototypes, learning something new with every single one. This philosophy of failing early to succeed sooner led them to invent a brand new category of bike they called coasting. It stripped away all the complexity and just focused on the simple joy of riding. And finally, they had to tell a compelling story. Because an idea, no matter how great it is, needs a narrative to really catch on. They didn't just sell a new bike, they sold the story of rediscovering a simple childhood joy. A great story builds that emotional connection and can turn a customer into a true advocate for your idea. The Shimano story is a fantastic example, right? But the real power of this way of thinking isn't just about selling more stuff. It can be applied to some of our biggest, toughest challenges to actually help design a better world.
Think about it. The exact same mindset that reinvented the bicycle can be used to tackle these massive, messy, complex problems. We can use it to redesign things you can't even touch, like a patient's journey through a hospital, or to take on huge systemic issues like poverty or education.
And this is happening right now, all over the world. Teams are using this toolkit to create low-cost water filters in Africa. The Red Cross used it to totally redesign the blood donation process just by understanding why people were anxious. From creating new banking services for farmers to making hospitals work better for patients, this is a seriously powerful engine for positive change. So the big takeaway here isn't just a lesson for big corporations. It's about a new capability that every single one of us can learn and use. Which, of course, brings us to the real question. What will you design? And here's the most important thing to remember from all of this. You do not have to be a designer to think like one. Not at all. This toolkit, empathy, brainstorming new ideas, and building quick prototypes, it's available to literally everyone. Managers, teachers, engineers, community organizers. It's really just a way of looking at the world with a little more curiosity and a desire to actually go out and try things. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. After hearing about this human-centered approach, what problem, maybe in your job, in your community, or even just in your own life, will you start to look at a little bit differently? What's one assumption you could challenge by just starting with empathy? If this explainer gave you a new tool for your toolbox, please subscribe for more deep dives into the big ideas that are shaping our world. Thanks for watching.